On June 26, 1939, Neil Albert was born at his grandparents' farmhouse in Arlington, South Dakota. The first year and a half of Neil's life was spent in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. After that, Neil and his family moved to Lake Preston, South Dakota. His grandfather was very sick and his dad needed help run the gas station that he owned. Growing up, some of Neil's favorite hobbies were building erector sets, riding bikes around the neighborhood, and playing baseball with his friends. One of Neil's friends was Fred Adams, his next-door neighbor. Fred and Neil lived next to each other the entire time they lived in Lake Preston. In his time in Lake Preston, Neil played a lot of youth baseball. Some of his favorite places to go were the movie theater, where a ticket would cost about 10 to 35 cents, and the neighborhood pool. Some of his favorite places to eat were the Lake Preston Cafe, where he would often get a hamburger and a malt, his favorite food at the time. Lake Preston was so small, a population of 700 in fact, that everyone in his grade was in the same class, from kindergarten to his senior year in high school. Neil attended two schools, Lake Preston Elementary, which was K through 8, and Lake Preston High, which was 9th grade to 12th grade. The high school he attended was Lake Preston High. Their mascot was the Lake Preston Divers because they were the only school in the entire district of 3 schools to have a swimming pool. Neil attended the University of South Dakota and majored in business administration. Neil's first job was at the Ford Management Training Program. Neil spent a year as an accountant for the Air Force National Guard. In 1964, he worked as a salesman for IBM. After that, he worked as a Merrill Lynch stockbroker. In the fall of 1965, he went to a party where he met Sandy Schultz. Neil proposed at a picnic that they were on in August of 1966 at St. Croix River. A few months later, in November 1966, Neil and Sandy got married in Lester Prairie, Minnesota. At the time, Neil worked as a salesman for Xerox, and Sandy was a high school English teacher. One of Neil and Sandy's favorite things to do was to go camping, boating, and fishing at Lake Carlos, Minneapolis. On August 13th, 1969, Neil and Sandy's firstborn child, Leanne, came into the world. On October 26, 1971, their second child, Mark, was born. In the summers, Neil loved to take his family up to the Avent Lake cabin, where they would have fun boating and fishing. After Mark and Leanne went off to college, Neil and Sandy loved to go camping in their motorhome. Neil retired in 1995. At the time, he was working as a salesman for Gibb Electronics. In 2000, Neil and Sandy bought a house in Florida. The same year, Neil's first grandkid, Leanne's daughter Julia, was born. A few years later, his second grandkid, Joe, was born. At this point, Neil and Sandy spent about half their year, mostly the summer, in Minnesota, and the other half, the winter, in Florida. In late 2006, Mark's first son, Neil's third grandson, William, was born. Sadly, on Thanksgiving of 2010, Sandy passed away from breast cancer. Neil now has 4 grandchildren and is 81 years old. And I couldn't imagine having a better grandpa.